Hi, everybody. Today I thought I'd mix it up a little bit, not talk about politics, not talk about the internet, just talk about something that I think everybody goes through. That's some of the old cars that they used to have and wish they hadn't gotten rid of. The first car that I ever owned was a 1966 Dodge Charger, and I remember I got this car, and they were inexpensive at the time. This is the late '70s, and these were big cars, and they weren't the cool car. The cool car would have been the '69 Dodge Charger. This was the '66 Dodge Charger, and it had a whole different body style. It had the long sloping back. It wasn't really a very streamlined looking car, and it didn't drive streamlined either. Mine had a 440 in it, but it was a tank to drive. It didn't have the braking on it wasn't very good. The acceleration was all right. It wasn't great. It had a lot of torque, but it just wasn't a really fast car. But it wasn't the cool car. I think I bought it for 400 or 500 bucks, and I think I sold it a few years later for 600 bucks. But I had no idea the thing would be worth anything in the future. It just wasn't that kind of car. It had this kind of back seat, where it had the back seat with the console in the middle of it. This is what the front of it looked like, and just was not the cool car. And like I said, the '69 Dodge Charger would have been the cool car. This just wasn't the cool car. But I wish I had it back because it definitely was a muscle car, and for the price that I let it go, I shouldn't have sold it because I think I got 600 bucks out of it when I sold it. So that's number one. I wish I had that car back, and I don't. So that one's gone. The second car I owned was this car right here. It was a '74 Dodge Charger, and this isn't my car, but it could be because my car was identical to this car. It had a brown color with a white roof, and it had these like shark-like fins right here, which made it a kind of a cool car. But once again, it wasn't the cool car. It was a '74 Dodge Charger. If it would have been like early '70s, and would have been more like mine had a 318 in it, which was the economical motor. It wasn't the hot rod motor. It wasn't the motor that got all the attention. It was fast. It wasn't like the 440 Charger that I had from '66, but it was a pretty quick car. I mean, it wasn't slow, but it was not fast. But I had this car. I wished I would have it back because it was a nice car. It was a cool car. I really liked it. I had this car all the way through high school. But it was a cool car. I liked that car. I wish I had it back. The next car I had was a 1980 Turbo Trans Am. And I can't remember what we paid for. I think we paid around $8,000 for the car, and I don't think it held its value very well. But the thing about this Turbo Trans Am is it was a cool car, but once again, it was just a little off the mark. It'd have been better to have one in the late '70s with the Super Duty motor or the 455. The Turbo Trans Am motor sucked. I mean, it totally sucked. It had, I can't remember the displacement, is a little bit over 300 cubic inches. But the turbo part of the thing didn't work at all. I don't know if they didn't just have mine looked just almost like this. No, not quite like that. Mine was silver and red. But they didn't have the turbo part of it. Right here it is. That's the fucking motor right there. Yeah, this is the motor. And so for some reason, this thing, the 301 Turbo, it was not a fast car. It was not a fast car. And I don't know, the turbo just wasn't set up right because it just didn't have any power. I mean, it was decent. I mean, it was just a mediocre car. It looked cool, but the performance sucked. But it was just, at T-tops and all the good stuff, but it was just not a fast car. It was not a fast car. It was just just kind of a frumpy car to drive, and it wasn't a real good handling car either. But it was cool. I mean, during that was a Smokey and Bandit. That was this kind of stuff. And at that time, that was just a very cool car to own, was a Trans Am. So the best part about that is I had a really nice stereo, Bose stereo. But yeah, the car was okay, but I wish I had it back. The next car I had was a fast car, and that was a '71 GTX with a 446 pack. Mine was blue like this. Had an automatic 727. I think I bought the car for around $8,000, and a few years later sold the car for $12,000. If I had it today, it'd probably be worth $45,000, $50,000. But once again, it wasn't the coolest car on the block. I was actually looking for the Hemi. I wanted a 426 Hemi, and because Hemis at the time were a few $1,000s higher, because I'm talking early 80s, late 70s, these cars were pretty cheap. Nobody wanted them because they were gas guzzlers and they just hadn't gotten the kind of recognition that they have today. And they were limited as far as the number of cars that were built. I think mine only had it was a production of a couple hundred, 220, 250. They had the options, the six pack, had an air grabber hood and all that stuff. But it was a cool car. But see, the older GTXs would have been cooler. The one I had was a little bit not as cool as the old squared off looking ones like the Roadrunners. So, but it was a nice car. I wish I would have it back. I shouldn't have sold it. I just sold it because I needed the money to go to school, and I figured, what the hell, just sell the car, and it's worth more than I paid for it. So I felt pretty good about it. But it was a cool car. I wish I had it back. The final car I wish I hadn't sold is my Acura. I had a 2001 Acura TL, and this is the way it looked on the interior. That was a nice car. I always loved this car because the car was pretty quick. It wasn't like race car quick, but it was fast. It was nimble. And it was the most comfortable car to drive because it had leather interior and the seats were very comfortable. And I always liked the way the automatic transmission worked. It had where you kind of move the stick from side to side to get to the gears. And this was a cool car. And this was the motor, and a VTEC motor. I remember the VTEC, the 3.2 VTEC motor. It was a quick motor. I think it had over 200 horse. So this was a fun car to drive. I wish I hadn't gotten rid of it. I wish I had it back today because I really miss this car. It was sporty. It was fun. It was just a quick car to drive. It was very nimble, and it was a car I wish I had back. Now that I've gone through the 5 cars I wish I had back, I'm going to cover the one that I'm glad is gone. Actually, 2 I could cover. One of them is a 2001 Chevrolet extended cab pickup. This was the biggest piece of shit I've ever owned in my life. I mean, this piece of shit should have never been built. I had so many problems with this pickup. I had transmission trouble with it. I had, it would constantly go out of, the fuel pump would go out of it. And the fuel pump was in the tank, so you had to drop the tank in order to get the fuel pump out. This was the biggest piece of garbage. It had brake problems, alternator problems, starter problems, every fucking thing you could think of. This thing had a problem with. I mean, this was a joke. Maybe I just had a bad one. I don't know. But this is a car that I'm glad left my my driveway the day that we got rid of it. I finally ended up selling it to a guy pretty cheap. But this was a bad car. But probably the ultimate car that I hated the most, that I was glad to see go, was the Land Rover. I had a Land Rover, and I can't even remember the year of it. It wasn't this. This is the Range Rover. I had a Land Rover, but the Land Rover, I mean, it was. Let me see if I can find the Land Rover that I had. It was white, and it had the luggage rack on top, and the luggage rack was really awkward looking and really ugly looking. Let me see. It's probably back about in 2004, 2005. It looks like. See if I can find one that kind of. Yeah, here we go. Right here, like this. Except it had the big luggage rack on it. This thing was the biggest piece of garbage. And the reason it was such a big piece of garbage is it just didn't handle well. It was too, the center of gravity was too high on it, and it had all kinds of mechanical problems. It had rust problems. It had every problem you can imagine. It had maybe the luggage rack we had on it was aftermarket because it was a huge luggage rack. But right after we put the luggage rack on it, it started rusting around the top, and then the starter went out on it. And everything it did to this thing was expensive because it's Land Rover. But I was never so glad to see a vehicle go. By the time this thing finally got sold, it had almost everything wrong with it. And I finally sold it to a kid who he was just sold on the Land Rover idea, that it was some sort of exclusive vehicle. But that thing was the biggest piece of shit you could ever imagine. I don't even know why anybody would own a Land Rover. Although, maybe again, I just had a bad one. But the Chevrolet pickup and the Land Rover are 2 vehicles I'm glad I never have to look at again. So anyway, just a quick video about some vehicles that I used to own. I appreciate you listening.